Hey friends, it's that time again. Kenny Jahng here with the Church Tech Today podcast. And today, it's going to be a fun one because it's someone I respect, but someone I like his name too. His name is Kenny Wyatt, and he is the CEO over at Pushpay. Now, Kenny and I have known each other for a while, and he's spent a couple of decades in the tech world, both in the church world and not. And this is where I love talking to leaders that have marketplace experiences like I do that help inform the church. And I think today's conversation is going to be interesting in that regard. And again, I love his deep connection to ministry. Today, he's leading Pushpay. And as you know, Pushpay, they have tens of thousands of ministries that they are helping grow and thrive and work on financial stewardship and more. I'm just thrilled to be able to tap Kenny's insights here as a leader and also in terms of what Pushpay is doing for a lot of the churches and ministries out there. And one of the things that we're going to frame today's conversation is Pushpay does this annual State of the Church Technology Report. You can go back to past articles we have at CTT and look at some of the insights. And every single year, there's some new, really good insights that I think that we can learn from. I think this year there's over 1,500 pastors that have been polled in this thing. And so, Kenny, welcome, first of all. Thank you so much for being with us. I know you're super busy. I really appreciate you dropping by today.
Kenny, great to see you again, and look forward to the conversation, for sure.
Absolutely. So let's get right to it. So the new report for 2025, the State of the Church Technology Report, one of the things I picked up there is that 86% of pastors now say that technology increases connection. And this is like completely different than when I was a church online pastor, where we were in the doghouse thinking that, technology is going to help ministry and connection. From your perspective, what do you think is the biggest mindset shift of growing churches that they've now seen technology that maybe others are still resisting, but these growing churches really understand what technology offers us?
Yeah, it's a great question, Kenny. And by the way, I will just do a very quick plug on State of Church Tech. If you get a chance to download it,
Yes.
We believe it is one of the best kind of guiding documents out there on what is happening inside of churches and ministries today, and how technology can be leveraged to make our ministries much more efficient and much more effective over time. And so if you don't have a chance to download it, please do. As Kenny mentioned, 1,700 pastors, all of whom are decision makers around technology or influence technology decisions, were kind of poured their heart and soul into this report. So many thanks to those that participated this year. Your question, 86% of pastors now say technology does increase connection. We shouldn't be surprised at this. Those churches that are growing and thriving oftentimes have high correlation to using technology, not as a replacement for connection, but actually as an amplifier for connection, right? Those that we're really seeing, and you see this every single day, Kenny, those that we're seeing using technology in a mighty way for their ministries are using it to create deeper outreach, create deeper connections. We know that a lot of church is happening online today versus actually inside the four walls of the church. And so technology just enables more and more pastors to create that personal connection in ways that have never been kind of done before in ministry. Would love to unpack some of this as we go in places like AI and other tools that are starting to emerge on the scene for church technology. Now, I'd also say that many pastors are telling us through this report that data isn't scary anymore, right? The data is actually providing insights, right? So you can start to make some connections, some correlation with the right data, with the right platform, in order to understand what is the next connection point you should be making. Who is that seeker that's walking through the front door of the church? How they engage with your social content? How do they want to be kind of communicated to and with over their path of either evangelism or discipleship? And so we're seeing churches really thrive by leveraging these connections through data.
I love it. Now, here's an interesting point that I picked up also, that according to the report, churches now are, I think, 4 times more likely to say that church actually reduces loneliness. And that to me stood out, because I think many pastors today, and a lot of people in general, will say tech usage actually leads to the opposite outcome, that it's actually promoting loneliness, it's compartmentalizing people's lives. Why do you think the leaders from the survey are saying that it's 4 times more likely now that tech reduces loneliness?
Yeah, I mean, I think your statement isn't wrong, right? That I do think we see in this world today that in many cases technology actually increases loneliness, and so I don't think that that is necessarily wrong. I just think it's incomplete, right? So as you think about churches leveraging technology, and if they do it kind of, if they leverage technology that's intentionally designed for their community, it actually has the opposite effect, right? So think about, for instance, a small group leader. So someone who maybe is leading a dozen or 15 different individuals or even couples as part of a small group on a regular basis. Technology actually can help reduce the loneliness that some of their small group members may feel, right? So if you start to see a drop off in attendance, if you start to see measured engagement reduction, that creates a trigger for an outreach. That creates a trigger to maybe deepen a relationship because of a life event that may have happened, that therefore technology can help come alongside that small group leader in order to kind of trigger them to say, hey, this person needs outreach. This person maybe isn't as engaged as they once were. And that act alone could help reduce loneliness, as one simple example that happens every single week in a church.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, those tools that you can now use in Church Tech, it's practical. I think that's a practical use case of like, how do you actually tackle the person who needs connection, needs empathy, needs support, and the church being the church, right?
Exactly right. I think the other thing I'd mention is, in part of the report, you saw this as well, that a vast majority of churches are now using some sort of live streaming as part of the ministry. And that digital outreach, that ability to take a church message, for instance, a sermon, to just about anywhere in the world of one of their members. They could be on a treadmill, they could be on a hike, they could be on an airplane watching the sermon. All of a sudden, the gap closure for loneliness starts to become much, much smaller, because now, rather than having to sit in a Sunday service, they can feel connection with that same kind of ecosystem of the pastor preaching directly to them, no matter where they are. So again, one other example around where many kind of pieces of technology are being able to use to kind of close this divide of loneliness that we're experiencing in the world.
Now, there's also a tension that I see, Kenny. Like, so I think nearly half of pastors say that tech deepens faith, which is, I totally see that if you use it strategically and you have intention, that technology actually deepens your faith. Yet we do still see this continued decline in church attendance overall, right, in our culture today. What are your thoughts on that tension between those 2 points? Like tech is accelerating, deepening, supporting faith, spiritual development, and yet we're seeing declines in church attendance. Like, how should the pastor listening in today think about this?
It's a great point. So I'll leave you maybe with a couple of different angles on that same question. One is, we are seeing that decline start to flatten just a bit, right? So you probably read the Pew Research study just recently that was announced that 62% of Americans are identifying as Christians. That's encouraging, right? And so we are starting to see, while we have seen over the past few decades this decline in Christianity, we are starting to see those trends flatten out here as of late, which to me is super encouraging and super hopeful for the church. More importantly, is we're starting to see some trends. While it is true, overall decline, we are starting to see some trends by generation that are super encouraging. We're starting to see engagement by the younger generation. I'm thinking millennials and Gen Z specifically, that are more engaged and more deeply engaged in the church than ever before in their own individual generations, but also relative to previous generations. And there's a lot of reasons for that, right? Churches that are embracing digital, that are embracing technology tools, are appealing to those generations, right? The second is we're starting to see a lot more trends, for instance, that just take donations or giving, for example, that churches that are starting to connect real purpose and reason for the gift and the giver, particularly for the younger generations, that those two items are starting to correlate even more and more. So this appeal to younger generations, I think, is having an impact. And I predict the data will have to bear it out over time. I predict that we start to see a revival, particularly in the U.S., as a result of some of these emerging trends in the younger generations here as of late.
Yeah, I know that I think the stat I saw is that Gen Z is responsible for something like 34% of church tithing and giving. So it's like a third.
Yeah.
Their
Yeah.
total giving is a little bit lower due to lower income, obviously, but their participation rate is notable and it's rising basically, right? As church engagement rises, their giving is rising.
And imagine over time, Kenny, as those generations start to get into their earning years, not that the total donation volume is kind of stat number one, but what it does show, donation volume and total donation amounts are strongly correlated to engagement in the church, right? So if you believe those two are highly correlated, imagine over the next several years as those generations start to hit their earning years, what the impact of engagement could be in the church over time.
Yeah, and again, I think we're talking about digitally native generations now. And I think with nearly half or over half now of churchgoers actually give electronically, which I think just anecdotally, the average pastor that's not something they would report on a survey, right, of themselves, of perception, that more than half of the churchgoers are actually giving electronically, which I think is just something that our perceptions have to catch up with reality in that way.
Right.
Now, the surveys, I love this because the surveys saying the pulse of the country is positive in terms of digital, in terms of giving, in terms of generosity, that the 70% of pastors and leaders are now saying that tech increases generosity. Now, I think that tech solutions like Pushpay offer more options for giving today versus 5 years, 10 years ago, right? But is it just that there's more surface area, more options, more places to give, more ways to give, or is it something else that you think is driving this increase of generosity because of the technology that we have available today?
It is a great question. And by the way, this statistic, the 70% say tech is increasing in generosity, actually doesn't surprise us as Pushpay at all, because we see it in our own data, right? We see when customers move to Pushpay, the technology tools that are available now to that church, we see generosity increasing to a point to where actually, we offer a guarantee of generosity.
Yes.
Just by implementing the tools that Pushpay offers to churches. So this didn't surprise us, but it is, in my mind, it's more than just access. Yes, of course, having more access to giving tools and technology will increase generosity, but it's more than that, right? So let me maybe leave you with a couple of different statistics. One is, and this is to your access question. We launched Apple Pay, I don't know, several quarters, maybe a few years ago, but before my time. But what we're seeing in Apple Pay, for instance, is that 54% of first-time donors will use Apple Pay. Now that's an incredible statistic, because what that tells you is those that are coming in, it somewhat goes back to the Gen Z and millennial comment I made earlier, right? Those that are walking through the front door of your church for the very first time, more than half of them are going to use what is most common, what is most comfortable to them, and what's easy for them to engage from a donation perspective, and that's Apple Pay. As well as other technologies, but that's just one example of many where we see that it increases generosity because access makes it so much easier. I could say that about ACH. I could say that about cards. I could say that about crypto, for instance. Having to use your words, kind of as many access options available to you, of course, is going to increase generosity. But it's more than that, right? What also has to come with it is tying that donation, tying that gift, that tithe, back to something that's meaningful and purposeful to the donor. We're seeing more and more churches start to make this very, very strong correlation, even from the pulpit, about what the gift is actually driving, right? And so in my mind, that's the rest of the swing, right? That's the rest of what increases generosity, is not just having access to great technology tools like Pushpay, but actually kind of tying what the gift means to the broader impact of the community, to the broader impact of the kingdom, and finally to the broader impact of kind of the world around us. And so I think those two things, and in conjunction with one another, lead to this 70% say tech is increasing generosity.
Yeah. And I think, again, it is those tools that allow you to, it's not just the old offering plate where it's like, oh, you only have one option. The money goes in here and that's it. There's no designated, there's no campaigns, there's no, the options that we have available that tech gives us is quite amazing, I think, in that regard.
Yeah. And what I would say, Kenny, to that as well, and I had the opportunity to be in literally dozens, not hundreds of churches in a year, right?
Yeah.
Just customers. Oftentimes I'll go to a Wednesday night or a Thursday night service. I was in one last week in Alabama. But my point in all this is what I'm hearing a lot from the pulpit and from messages is this idea of a recurring gift, right?
Yeah.
Because it's obedient, right? God calls us to be obedient in our giving, and one way to show obedience is actually through a recurring gift, and that is the biggest driver that we're seeing in tying kind of increased generosity and technology is through the recurring gift. Many churches that we deal with, that we kind of have the opportunity to serve today, are reporting between 60 and 80% of their gifts are now coming through recurring, which is obviously nice and stable from a donation perspective, but it's more than that. It's also, what it also means is that many of their congregants, that many of their members are being obedient to what God's calling us to do on a regular basis.
I love that. What if we shift gears a little bit, because the new kid on the block, the popular kid in class is AI. And I want to talk about AI a little bit here, because this is important for the future, but it's also here now and today. So, and it seems like most pastors now are watching and paying attention to AI in 2025. We just did a state of AI in the church report here at Church Tech Today, and it's super encouraging. Like, the majority of pastors are actually for the use of AI in ministry today. But there's still a bunch of people that are hesitant, that are concerned, that are trying to be intentional and steward the technology in the right way. I would say, from your perspective, what are some of the questions from your point of view that church leaders should be asking about AI that aren't even on their radar yet, right? They haven't even thought about these questions. As a technologist on your side, what's one or two questions you might offer that are wise questions that a pastor should start to ask about AI today?
Great question. A couple that come to mind. One is, if I'm a pastor of a church, I might be asking, how can AI be used to foster genuine spiritual connection with the members of my church, with visitors of my church, with folks that maybe even be seeking my church in the zip codes that surround, for instance, the church? How can AI be used to foster genuine connection with those people? And I think there's some really cool tools out there. I'll talk maybe a little bit later about what Pushpay is doing on the AI front. But that would be the very first question I would ask is, how can AI help my job or my staff's job be easier to make connections and therefore make outreach to those that are either seeking or that I'm trying to disciple inside of my church? I do think your point of it being a double-edged sword is actually a good one, right? I do think that leaders should also be asking, and considering, what are the ethical implications of AI in my ministry, right? How do I think about data security and data privacy as I look to leverage AI-driven insights, for instance, inside of my church? And so those are probably two, maybe opposing questions I would be asking if I'm a pastor today, considering how I use AI. What we're seeing as far as very, very early trends. One is, you probably saw in the report, we almost doubled, actually more than doubled, the number of pastors that are thinking about, considering, wanting to learn more about AI as part of their ministry. That's a big step in a single year. It's a material step. We typically don't see a jump in data like that year over year. So what it tells us is AI is on the forefront of everything we're doing as a consumer, for instance, in our daily lives. It's also on the minds of our pastors and about how they make their ministries that much more effective. And so I would say start with those two questions. What we're learning is, however, those that are adopting it early, those that are adopting AI early, are using it to augment and replace maybe some more methodical kind of outreach steps that are made easier with AI, right? Sending emails, sending communications, trying to correlate social engagement with content that I'm trying to figure out how I then use as outreach tools, for instance. What we're seeing it not used at all, which I love this. I love the discipline of pastors, is we're not seeing it used yet, and maybe never, for content creation, right? We're not seeing pastors use AI to go generate sermon kind of content. That is still held very protected as a way that I want to breathe into the spiritual life of my church, and I'm going to do that on my own versus using technology to drive it.
Yeah. The figures that you guys had in the report mirrors the report that we did with the state of AI, and that currently, I think you said 45% of pastors are actually adopting AI usage right now today. And I think that to me is, I don't know, that's encouraging to me, because I think what you're saying is that measured approach of increased adoption is the thing that we need going forward. Now, what about Pushpay's products and services and offerings? Like, can you give us some insights as to how you are thinking about AI across your platform and your offerings?
Yeah, for sure. I think about it across the discipleship journey, right? So, and I'll describe maybe a few things we're thinking about and actually deploying today in our technology platform. If you think about, for instance, evangelism, right, and how you use AI at your back with Pushpay in order to increase the effectiveness of evangelism, or getting new seekers, new members of your church through the four walls of the church. We're, for instance, in the process of developing with Resi, for instance, how do we leverage the content, all of the content that sits inside of the library of a church of Livestream? How do you leverage that, chop up that data, create social kind of posts around it, and then use it as an outreach tool for evangelism, and do that in a way that AI can help kind of skip a ton of steps, if you will, in actually snipping that content, making it specific to some topics that maybe you want to generate inside of a community, and then therefore create that social content for you. So that's one area of kind of leveraging literally hundreds, if not thousands, of hours that most churches have sitting on Resi of just content that could be leveraged for social outreach and evangelism. And so that's a positive use of AI that Pushpay is helping to drive. On the flip side of the spectrum, you think about discipleship, right? We have already and will continue to embed inside of our CHMS product and our donor management product the connections that AI can help us drive between donors around engagement, and how you help disciples grow in their spiritual journey by using those technology tools. We know for certain, the data shows us, that if someone's involved in a small group, they're leading as a volunteer, they've got kids in kids ministry, that they're donating, they're tithing through recurring giving, they're tithing on a regular basis, for instance, that all of that points to engagement and spiritual growth over time. And so being able to make those connections for pastors through AI-driven insights, but more importantly, then helping pastors through AI figure out what is the next point of connection, what's the next outreach in that discipleship journey, who should I engage for the next volunteer, who should I engage for the next small group leader, for instance. All of that can be kind of technology used for good at the back of a strong XP or a strong SP, in order to make those connections and drive that discipleship journey. So you can tell I'm passionate about it, Kenny. But
me too.
I have just a ton of just confidence in what AI is going to bring the church, if we deploy it right, and if we're smart about kind of how we think about data privacy and the other issues that also surround the AI topic.
Yeah, and I think we're hosting a vibe coding event in the fall in September, and I think a couple members of your team are going to join us. And I think this collaboration posture that your team has with church leaders, I think, is what we need for the kingdom as a whole. Okay. As we wrap up here today, you have a room full of pastors, executive pastors, church leaders, staff in front of you listening to this. What's your pitch for why they should be looking at Pushpay and ChurchStack. I mean, most churches out there have a lot of these solutions already of some sort. We're not in the wild, wild west days of 10 years ago when the majority of churches did not have a CHMS installed. They didn't have, online giving, etc. What's your pitch today? Can you frame it and just give pastor a sense of what is the differentiator, or what's different about when we adopt your products and services and offerings? What is it going to do to our ministry?
Yeah, I'd maybe break it up in a couple of different pieces. One is, Pushpay has been around for quite some time. It was in many places of technology and ministry. It was and continues to be the forerunner of technology and kind of how we make ministry more effective and more efficient over time. Tens of thousands of churches and ministries trust Pushpay on a regular basis because of that. We have a proven track record of increasing generosity over time by some of the proprietary tools that we've built over the years. And it frankly is a very, very safe and secure platform that churches have depended upon for quite some time. But it's more than that, right? As you think about combining, for instance, donor management, so our tools for giving and generosity, with CHMS, right, that's now running kind of the back office of your church, the front office of your church, kids ministry, volunteer scheduling, the list goes on and on. Now combining all the data, the rich data that comes out of our CHMS with donor management, imagine the insights that churches can now get today by combining those two things. We call it stack, right? So now we can give churches, and they can provide themselves very, very rich insights about the health of their church, the health of their donors, the spiritual journey that they're helping to drive, and the impact of that spiritual journey over time. That's the second piece. Now you combine that with Resi. Now you combine that with live streaming in an app that combines all of this together. And you've got really all four corners of the church covered through Pushpay, right? Those that are walking through the front doors and attending a live service, those who happen to be watching a stream, you can make the same connections, correlate the same data and insights for those that happen to be watching a stream versus sitting in a pew in a church, for instance. And that's where all this gets really exciting, is to be able to put all of those pieces together in a single platform that Pushpay has built to provide fantastic insights to pastors in their ministries. So I maybe as a wrap, I'd call it a very comprehensive ecosystem. That's not just our technology. We're integrating other technologies as well. You probably saw a few weeks ago, we launched a partnership with Visitor Reach to help not only evangelism and kind of applying modern marketing tools to the church, but also something simple as click to tap or click to give, for instance. All kind of bundled in the exact same product. And so I'd say the ecosystem that Pushpay has built is something that, for those that aren't trusting Pushpay today, pastors should certainly consider.
No, I love it. I think the key word is ecosystem. I think it's comprehensive, and you have this holistic approach. Okay, we're going to pivot to a lightning round of fun questions, if that's okay. Mr. Wyatt, here we go. No prep necessary for these ones. So, first one is, what's your favorite app on your phone or piece of tech right now that you just can't live without?
Okay, it's a two-part answer.
Okay.
One is any of our Pushpay apps that are driving our tens of thousands of churches, because that is my favorite, right? Because we're helping ministries leverage tech in a meaningful way on a regular basis. That's the first. The personal one is MyFitnessPal. So I am tracking everything I'm eating and using AI to help kind of create trends around that. But it's also integrating into an ecosystem where I'm measuring weight and body fat and BMI and everything else on a regular basis. So all of that coming together in a single platform is super cool. I can't live without that app right now.
I'll put a second vote in for MyFitnessPal. Yes. Okay. What is something about your job that would surprise people?
Oh, that's a good question. I just recently took over as CEO of Pushpay. You mentioned at the very beginning that happened in April. But this may surprise people. I'm not sure. But the amount of time that I'm on the road, I think sometimes surprises people, and maybe my family actually sometimes. But honestly, it's what I love to do, Kenny, right? I love to be in front of pastors. I love to be in front of XPs and decision makers and staff leaders and problem solving with them in real time about how we can help their ministries more effective. So I think that would surprise people how often I'm in row 19, seat F,
Yes.
leaving Denver and trying to get in front of as many customers as I possibly can on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and I love your heart. Like, for as long as I've known you, getting in front of the actual ministry leader has been something that's been very consistent for you. Okay, here's a really religious question, and this might like make or break our relationship here. Apple or Android?
I am a diehard Apple.
Yes.
Surrounded by Apple devices, Kenny. So it's super easy. It's super easy to answer that question.
Okay, awesome.
Home and work.
That's an easy one. Okay, last one is fill in the blank. The future of church tech is blank. The future of church tech is blank. How would you answer that sentence?
The future of church tech is driving connections.
I love that. I love that. Well, Kenny, thank you so much for being with us. If someone wants to follow up and connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Connect with me personally on LinkedIn, or connect with Pushpay and me across all the social channels. So you name the social channel, you'll find Pushpay for sure. We'd love to connect there. You can also find in all those social media channels the latest State of the Church Tech Report for 2025. Highly encourage everybody to download that and learn kind of what's happening inside of this amazing category that we love to serve.
Yeah, we'll put the link to the report in our show notes, and you can go to churchtechtoday.com where we have some articles that actually unpack some of the insights that go down a little deeper further too. And so thank you to everyone listening to our conversation today. Thank you for tuning into today's episode. If this conversation sparks some new ideas for you, for your church, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss some future episodes. And please, be sure to share this episode with a pastor or teammate who needs to hear it. It is a great excuse I've found for our listeners to start conversations about topics like this within your ministry and where it needs to go with technology in general. Use this as that conversation fodder. And if you have any questions, any feedback, or just wanted to suggest topics, because we use your topics and suggestions to tackle the next episodes, email me directly at kenny@churchtechtoday.com. I'd love to hear from you. So till next time, remember, don't just build with tech, lead with it. Thank you, and see you in the next video.